Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Doug, I don't know about you. My first thinking of the application of this was not that it was going to be used to invent new money. We have money. It strikes me as imperfect money for sure. We can debate that, but I didn't think it'd be like, I thought this would be a good technology, for example, for audit. I could imagine accounting firms automating a lot of what they do.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Doug, that another place that'd be very powerful would be voting. And in fact, it's my understanding that some of the leaders in the space, including Broadridge, have invested considerably in blockchain technology that could be used in connection with shareholder voting. But that's another good example, Doug. Yeah. Because the SEC would need to signal that using that technology in that way would not generate additional liability. Now, I hope that my colleagues are working on that. I think they don't want to stifle this innovation. I know some of my former colleagues in particular have been pushing on that, and I support that work. I think we could make shareholder voting easier, cheaper, and more accurate. I'm all for that. But I will say that that's why doing nothing is such an unlikely strategy. It's not likely to succeed.
Yeah. Well, we, the chair of the steering committee for this center is the general counsel at Ripple. Unfortunately, he was supposed to be here today, but he had to get pulled away.
I am
here. You're there. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So
Yes.
I don't know, Stu. You want to get in on this discussion, or just in general on fintech or blockchain technology? I know you've got some things on your mind that maybe Rob can chime in as well.
Sure. Well, thank you, Professor. As the chair of the center, this is wonderful that you're taking your time to do this. I think these conversations with thought leaders in the profession are incredibly important even in sane and normal days, and they're even more important in the days of kind of lockdown and social distancing and sequestering, because we need to stay connected as a legal community, so we keep thinking about issues that are forefront on our minds. So thank you so much for doing this. After having sheltered in place for 6 months in my home in New Jersey, I actually did get on a plane, and I'm sitting in Ripple's offices in San Francisco. Our CEO finally said, look, after 6 months, we just need to get the leadership team together for 2 days and just talk. So we did that, very socially distanced, six feet apart of everybody with microphones, but it was incredibly invigorating. But sitting here in San Francisco, in kind of the center of Silicon Valley and innovation, I did want to talk about the intersection of innovation and regulation. And we've talked about blockchain, and look, I come from the East Coast, traditional banking, blockchain and digital assets were not a twinkle in my eye 2 years ago before I joined Ripple. So this is new, I think, to all of us, but I think it's the innovation, the momentum behind the innovation and the inevitability of this innovation has just really been overwhelming, given my time here at Ripple. Just yesterday, the SEC announced yet another enforcement settlement against a digital asset company, and I don't want to talk about the specifics of that, but Commissioner Peirce was very prompt to publish her dissent from that, and it was a poignant dissent, and the fact that Commissioner Peirce has voiced her views on digital assets and the SEC's approach is not a surprise, but I did find this dissent particularly poignant, because what she said is essentially that she fears that the SEC is going to be on the wrong side of history when it comes to innovation. And I'll just quote one line. She says, by failing to challenge ourselves to experiment with new approaches to regulation, we and those whose interest we are pledged to serve risk surrendering the fruits of that innovation. So my question to you is general, not to talk about the specific case. But how do you think about whether it's the SEC's or any regulator's approach to innovation and the intersection of regulation, with the innovation being so new but so powerful, and regulation, being 70 or 80 or 90 years in the making. How do you marry the two so you're not sacrificing the innovation, but also you're also not sacrificing the policy goals of the regulation?
Well, Stu, first of all, thank you both for the question and for your leadership here at Rutgers and at the center. And you are very much at the center at Ripple of this new generational technology. I'm really excited to see what's next in this incredible space. First of all, let me start by saying, Commissioner Peirce is one of my most brilliant colleagues. I have great affection for her. I'm still in touch. I was delighted that she was confirmed for another 5-year term on the commission, along with my former counsel, now Commissioner Caroline Crenshaw. So Stu, I want to break down your question for our colleagues, and I'm going to have a question for you in a moment. So Stu's question is, Rob, on the one hand, we want to be sure not to be on the wrong side of history, as Commissioner Peirce put it, or if you prefer, we want to be sure not to stifle innovation. That's very important. We should be encouraging innovation, for sure. Stu, no one's against it. On the other hand, we're against fraud. And to the degree that this technology is being used to dress up old tricks and like defrauding investors or pumping up schemes into new technology, we don't want to be fooled by the new clothes. And I think what I've said so far, we all agree on. So here's my question for you. How do you do that? And my answer is that regulators do that by being in touch with the market, hearing what's happening, and helping the market work with the regulator to distinguish fraud from innovation. That's how it works. And I can tell you right now, when I was an investment banker at what used to be called Bear Stearns, not my fault, I can tell you right now, we would call the SEC all the time and say, here's our registration statement, here's what we're thinking of saying, and they would say, don't say that or say this. And Stu, you know the name for this, right? We call this guidance. Regulators provide guidance that helps the market understand where to go. Now, Stu, you would think from the passage you've just read in my colleague's dissent that she and others like them would be a big fan of guidance, because this would be a way for you at Ripple and everyone else to understand what regulators think the law is. Stu, is it your impression that my former colleagues on the SEC, Commissioner Peirce and friends, are very pro-guidance?
Well, I do, and in fact, her tweet, and in our world, everybody tweets, but her tweet, which accompanied the publication of her statement, she said, isn't it really time for us to provide some guidance on this issue?
For sure, but what here's the important details to in a speech about 2 years ago, Commissioner Peirce, called SEC Secret Garden.
Yep.
He objected to guidance because it is errant staff rulemaking. It's lawless law. And in fact, this administration has put out a document saying that we can't give guidance anymore, that it's athwart like the Article 2 or something, So look, here's my answer to you, Stu. They can't have this both ways, man. Right? You can't say that, no, you can't guide the market, but also no, you can't enforce the law. Because Stu, when I voted for these enforcement actions, I'd get big lectures from lobbyists about regulation by enforcement. But then I try to give guidance and they'd say, no, don't do that either. Now, what that means to me is that really what people want is not to be regulated. And that's where we part ways. Because actually, I think it's better for an emerging technology like this to set some standards. And Stu, I know you agree because you work at Ripple, one of the leaders in the industry, actually one of the firms that has been crucial to the forming of standards around the various securities law questions, et cetera. And how did we get from here to there? Because you guys can call Hinman and Val and all the other amazing people who do what they do and get answers to your questions. And don't have to have an APA open meeting every single time you want to know whether or not you guys can do something. So here's what I'd say with great respect to my former colleagues. Occasionally, the ideology on this question overwhelms the practicalities. As a practical matter, Stu, the only way for us to get to the place you want us to go is for the regulators to work together with the market through guidance. This is an area where my colleagues should be delighted to welcome it, rather than lecture SEC staff who are incredible public servants about doing their job.
So thank you for that, and I'll yield the floor back. With one final comment, that was incredibly helpful, Professor. As you know, and you've already acknowledged, Ripple has been on the forefront. I think the reason they hired me, who spent over 30 years in traditional banking and traditional law firm on the East Coast, is to help push the regulatory agenda. And I travel the world, or at least now I travel it virtually, meeting with central bankers and meeting with regulators, begging for regulation, whereas when I was a general counsel for a bank, I used to meet with the central bankers and regulators asking for regulatory relief. Here I'm saying, give me the regulation, let me know what the rules of the road are. But I do think the issue of practical guidance, which we've seen in Singapore, we've seen in Japan, we've seen in the UK, we've seen in Switzerland, the US is starting to feel that they are a half step behind, but we'll continue to push the issue. And I agree, what we need is clear guidance and regulation. So we know I think we know what bad looks like now. I think it'd be helpful if we know what good looks like. But thank you very much for your time.
Well, no, Stu, let me just say that is extremely well put. And just between you, me, and the 70 friends on the phone, let me say that I read Hester's statement. I understand where she's coming from, but you saw that what she really is advancing is a 3-year safe harbor from the securities laws for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Stu, man, like, first of all, it's going nowhere in Congress, number one. Number two, hearing you out, I don't think you want it. And with respect, you know your business better than I do, I don't think you should. Because you guys have spent the better part of the last several years hiring industry thought leaders like you, Stu, to figure this out and do it right. Why do you want to turn it into the Wild West? I don't think you do. I think what you want to do is make it a serious U.S. regulated, an area where the law is understood and followed by folks like Ripple. And where you don't have to compete with fly-by-nights who refuse to obey the law. So again, with great respect to my former colleagues, I agree with you, Stu. I think what is needed is regulatory leadership here. That requires us to be flexible and have guidance. Because, so I got to tell you, when I got to the SEC, people said, why don't you make a rule on crypto or ICOs, et cetera? My answer was, by the time we propose it, get comments, finalize it, get sued on it, and win, the regulation we wrote will be out of date. So instead, the way to do it is with the flexible, nimble guidance that people have been using since I was on Wall Street. And that's where I think Hester and I might see this a little differently.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yield the floor back.